All right. Well, I hope everybody is seeing my screen now. Thanks again for taking the time to join us today on our session, The Future of Construction Technology by Sage. And I'm Jeff with Sockeye, and I think I know the majority of the folks that are on here today's session, but if not, thank you for joining again. And just a little bit about Sockeye. Masaka was established in 2007 and serving construction clients across the US and Canada. And Sockeye is a Sage Intec, a premier business partner, which is the highest level in the Sage Intec channel. And so they've had a lot of accomplishments and awards over the last several years. And at Sockeye, we really are about building partnerships and relationships. So it's maybe a little different than some of the Skyline customers that have been on Sage 300A, a little bit different model, and we can talk about that a little bit later about our customer success plan. But it's a monthly subscription, and you're really working with a team of consultants, and we're there for you, not just implementation and training and those types of things, but really for ongoing support, customized dashboards and reporting, new hire training, all those kinds of things. And if you're not familiar with Sockeye, and I know some folks maybe still haven't got the word, but Sockeye did acquire Skyline earlier this year. And they've really focused on the Sage Intec construction. And at Skyline, we were learning that product, and we do 100, of course, and 300. But now with our combined power, the two companies and the construction knowledge in this space, it's really a great opportunity for our customers. As folks who are on this session, we got some 100 contractor and 300 construction folks. But as you're looking to migrate and make a move down the road to a true cloud solution, there's a lot of great knowledge and experience. And just a little bit of background. I know I was just mentioning 100 and 300, and some of you guys still call it Timberline today. But those are still our on-premise products, and they're not going away anytime soon. So the point of today's session is to make sure everybody gets a little bit of background of in an introduction to Sage Intec, and then you can make the decision when the right time for you to move to the cloud, to the Sage Intec construction, our latest offering. And Intec has been around for a number of years, actually back to 2000. And they are a leader in the true cloud space out there. So they're one of the earliest adopters. They're also the only cloud accounting solution that is recognized by the AICPA. We've also won a lot of awards in the Gartner customer satisfaction and their visionary cloud solution. So what we're going to look at today is a little bit of the workflow inside of Sage Intec, talk about the integration and really the with our open APIs in the cloud, how we can plug in other solutions, and really the dashboards and the drill down capabilities, things that we can't really enjoy today in Sage 300. We really opened up with the the cloud technology and the user interface that you guys are going to see today. And a lot of these graphics of these companies on the screen here, lots of them that you guys recognize. Many of you use some of the products today. These companies are also, some of them are working on it now. Other ones are already there with their integration to the Intec, like Procore and GCPay and HH2, Timberscan. Those products already have their integrations today, and customers are using those. So if you're on a third-party solution and you're enjoying that today and liking it, it's a high likelihood that you won't have to make a transition for those products. If your guys out in the field are already using and liking Procore and it's working awesome, then it can just be able to plug into the Sage Intec software. And so with that, I'm going to introduce Eric Ward, the president of Sockeye. Eric's going to do the presentation today. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to let Eric take over, but please feel free to ask questions, through the chat panel. I'll keep an eye on those for Eric, and I'll let you take it away, Eric. And I think you might be muted, Eric.
How about now? Can you hear me okay?
There we go. Gotcha.
Okay, great. Thanks. Like Jeff said, if you can, if you have questions, enter that in the chat, and I'll just keep going through the system and continuing my demo until I hear from him. But feel free to ask those as we go. What we're looking at here is Intec, and just a little bit of overview of what we're looking at. This is a dashboard. When you first log into Intec, you get to choose where it brings you. And so I have selected it to bring me to a dashboard when I first log in. So that's what I'm seeing here. You can have as many different dashboards as you want, and different people can have different access, or can have access to different dashboards. And one of the things that the dashboard allows us to do is to share information across the system. So gathering information, whether it's from AP or GL or projects, all of the data in the system is accessible through the dashboard. So we can share that information and then filter and drill down upon it. So you'll first notice here that I'm logged in at the top level. Now, if you have multiple entities, you'll be able to click that drop down and see all the entities in your system from that drop down, and you can select one of them. So if I select my GC company, it just opens up another tab, and then it displays that information for that entity on the window that I was in. So I was in the dashboard, so it brings me to the dashboard, and I can see that. Now, the flip side of that means that when I'm at the top level, I'm automatically consolidated. I'm looking at all the data across all entities, unless I've put specific filters in here. So I have the ability to both not only to look at all the data across across all entities, but I can also enter in transactions across all entities that I have access to. Now you can put in rules to say that certain entities can't transact with other specific entities. So maybe entity A can transact with entity B, but can't transact with entity C. So you can do that and put those data restrictions in there. But I can also filter in my dashboards. So I can select a specific date that I want to look at my dashboard at. I can apply that date, and then all the reports and items of my dashboard are going to be filtered based off that date. I can also add other filters from the data. So for example, if I wanted to look at a specific job, I could select a specific job from the dropdown, but not just a job. I can also select a group of jobs. So if I grouped my jobs by the type of customer it is, so if I have maybe I do some hotel construction or residential construction, I can categorize those jobs by the type of job it is. And then I have that to be able to group them and look at any reports with that group. So right now I've filtered my hotel jobs, and I can see all of my reports generated by that category. This is true for financial reports as well as reports that are not just financial, but looking at individual subsidiary modules. Okay. Another example here, if I wanted to look at services that are issued, well, I can look at subcontract services, apply that. And now I'm just looking at a dashboard that has subcontract both costs and revenue for my hotel jobs as of 3/31/2020. Okay, so I have that ability to share all of that, or to view all of that information. I can just clear this dashboard here and apply the clearing, and now I'm looking at all the data in real time for all of the types of jobs and all the items again. Now, another thing that we have capabilities to that isn't available in other products is the drill down right from the dashboard. So we have these key performance indicators, or these graphical arrows up and down with a dollar value. I should mention before I drill down on this, that all of the data in this dashboard, anybody can add the data that has access to. Again, it's covered by security, but you don't have to have any special tool skills in order to add to this dashboard. So all you have to do is know what GL accounts you want. So I can just know my AR GL accounts, and then I can add that account to these dashboards. Okay, you can see a comparison. This AR values up is 4 million. It's up 25,000 from the previous month. So I can get a comparison there. I can compare it year to year or against a budget. You know, if I'm looking at revenue, maybe I want to compare it to budget or something. But I can drill down, as I mentioned, on this, and now it brings up a report for me where I can see those dollar values of the accounts that make that up for both months. And then I can drill down all the way to the source transaction if I want. I'm going to pause a little bit on this drill down. Now, this report here that I'm drilling down on, again, remember that we're looking at accounts receivable. I can pull in information like, what is my job name? What is my employee that worked on that labor transaction for this job that's outstanding with an outstanding invoice? So I have the ability to break it down in these drill downs to view the information and kind of the details as I want. And I could continue back. If I continue to drill back on a labor transaction, it would bring me back to the time entry, you know, of that person, or the AP transaction is going to bring me back to the AP invoice for that transaction. Okay. So real powerful drill down capabilities. We can use the statistics as well. So we can see an active job count. But really, any statistics or any financial information we want to add to the dashboard, we can do that. So maybe we want to look at revenue per hour worked, or revenue per head count, or revenue per job, or repair and maintenance per vehicle. Any of those stats or financial information we want to, we can pull in. All right, I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this next report here. Font gets a little small for sharing the screen. So this report is a good example of pulling together information across the system. So this is called a project overview report, but really it could be a generic report. Any of these reports can be created real easily, and I can add to or subtract from the columns of this report. One of the things that I think this report does for us is gives us some idea of what's going on in Intec. So you can see my mouse change from the pointer to the magnifying glass. That's an indication I can drill down. And if I drill down on the project name here, it brings me to that project setup screen. So right to the window where I'm setting up information like that job type, or the job category, or my project manager on the job. Okay, so I can look and edit that data on the project setup. But these dollar values also give me drill down, and they give me drill down across different places in the system, in the software. So contract amount these are the owner contracts. It's going to bring me into those owner contracts with a schedule of values if I drill down on those. Project estimates are going to bring me to the estimate of the project. Okay, commitments will bring me to either purchase orders or subcontract agreements for the project. And these are open commitments. So this is still outstanding non-invoiced dollar values. So it hasn't hit the GL yet. Whereas the next two columns, the total billed and total cost, is information in the GL. So what have I billed on the transaction? Or I guess this could be the GL, or it could be pulling from my accounts receivable module. And then the total cost is what's been expensed on the project. So this could be AP or labor or materials or equipment, for example. So I can drill down on any one of those, and it's smart enough to know that the number I'm clicking on has context as to what that data is. Okay. All right, so continuing on with this report, there's a conditional highlight of percent committed and spent. And that percent committed and spent is looking at a calculation. But what I want to highlight there is that we have the conditional or smart highlighting to say that if it's blue, that means a 0 has been spent, 0% has been spent. So there might be some more information needed. Either the project hasn't kicked off like this line, or we have expense items, but we don't have an estimate for it. So it can't calculate a percent spent because there's no estimate. So that kind of indicates there's something needing to be done with those. The red then are the ones that are over 100% spent or committed. And then as the yellow, as they approach, I think it's 85% is what I put my threshold at. Then I said, make it yellow to indicate we're getting close to that threshold of the budget. But the idea to get across is our reports can be dynamic and more than just telling us a number. They can provide us information of what's actionable, what do we need to take action on, and what do the numbers make? How do the numbers get calculated? So that drill down. Okay. So moving on from my dashboard, we can do the same thing by project type, for example. This is looking at that field of the type of project it is. So commercial is rolling up to the commercial projects, hotels are rolling up to the hotel type. And this is just to indicate that we can use those fields on the setup. And that's for any, whether it's, we're doing this report on per job or per customer or per vendor or per subcontractor, per employee. We can have the same type of roll up to look at it instead of just an employee, a department of employees or a crew of employees. Instead of customer, maybe it's customer type. What is it, wholesale or resale, or the different types of customers that we may have. Okay. Just to continue on here a little bit more on the dashboard is we can break up, these are financial reports. We can break up financial reports by what we call dimensions. A dimension in Intec is something that's an additional, some people use segments in their GL accounts, but it could be departments, it could be projects, it could be customers or vendors or employees again, but they could be individual locations. But we can break up any financial report based off of one of those coding fields. All right. And then to continue on, pulling WIP reports in to our dashboards, pulling in graphs. This specific graph, I think I find interesting, that kind of shows on a budget how close we are to filling up the estimate. So the lime green is the actuals and the teal is the remaining estimate. So it continues to creep up as expenses are incurred. All right. So the dashboards in the modern system provide us, again, with a lot of information that we can take action on, a lot of filter and drill down capabilities, a lot of tools to be able to pass along information so that people can find it themselves. We also have different types of workflow and approvals through the process. So I'm just going to jump over to, as an example, a purchasing area. In my purchasing area, you can kind of graphically see how a transaction flows through the system in this tasks section. And each section, each step is unique for the organization that it's set up for. So some companies have a purchase requisition, others don't. So sometimes we don't, this step is grayed out, or we don't have that process. But we can set up different workflows for different kinds of transactions. So for example, if we have inventory purchase order for inventory, stocked inventory, that might have an approval that goes through some warehouse manager or somebody that's looking at when we get at a certain level of stock, we need to order more. So that might be a purchase orders for stock workflow. Whereas subcontracts might be a workflow where we're collecting different information, like we might be collecting bond information on the transaction itself, or we are putting it through a approval of the project manager for a subcontract agreement. So I'm just going to click on that subcontract agreement here. And you can see as we fill out a subcontract agreement, what the data entry looks like in a transaction window inside of Intec. And I can just start typing in a vendor name and it will start filtering out that vendor and then pull in information from that vendor itself. Okay, so this is a typical, happens to be a subcontract agreement, but it's a typical entry window. Intec is very consistent. So once you know one window, it can be applied, the knowledge can be applied for other windows. All right, so we can look at payment terms and some due date information, vendor information if we want. But since this is a subcontract agreement, I have sections that I am capturing additional information, like what's the scope of work to be completed? What's included in the scope of work? And these can be big fields or entering information, and what's excluded from the scope of work. And what are the terms of the agreement of the scope? Additionally, we can link an attachment to the transaction. So if I just grab I have an Excel spreadsheet, for example, here, if I just grab that and drop it right into that field, it's going to attach a transaction, attach a document, whether it's a PDF or an Excel spreadsheet, right to this transaction so somebody else can look at it. These purchase orders, or even if it came from a sales agreement or a schedule of values, can be emailed right out of the system, and any attachments on the transaction can also be included on the email itself. All right, so again, we have bonding information we may want to capture. All of that is optional information. If we wanted to show up on these transaction types, we can. And then we're just coding the transaction, maybe putting in some details on each line item of what's to be completed or what's to be done. Okay. One of the things I want to point out here is that in these transaction windows or in these drop downs, I have the ability to add on the fly. So for example, my cost type of subcontract hasn't been added to this specific cost code. And if I want to add it and I have the security to do so, I can just select the subcontract cost type, save it, and now that has added it to this cost code. So it's very little interruption if we need to make any adjustments to our structure or changes to the cost code. Again, controlled by security. Okay. All right, so then it's just a matter of recording the specific cost code information. Excuse me, the specific line item information on that subcontract. So one line item for $10,000. All right. So I'll go ahead and cancel that transaction, but the workflow works such that a purchase order is created, and then we can have any type of approval process. Maybe it's approved by the project manager or department manager, or maybe a certain dollar threshold triggers a second level of approvals. And then it continues on the workflow to receiving the shipments or the goods and creating an invoice if that's that company's workflow. But again, this can be configured for each and every organization. Okay, so navigating the system, we saw I navigated from the workbench here by clicking on a specific transaction, but it can also be navigated by the menu up top. So in Intec, we have the ability to configure our experience for each specific user places they most commonly go. So over here on the star, I'm going to see the areas that I tend to go most often. If I click on this drop-down menu, I'm going to see the areas that I have access to, all the areas in the system I have access to. So you'll see in purchasing, I have a few different types of transactions starred that are going to show up in my favorites, and I can move around quickly. This makes, again, easier to navigate, easier to find where we're going and the windows that we're looking for. I also have the ability right from this menu to do a few different, to access the information a few different ways. So for example, on purchase orders, if I click on the word purchase orders, it's going to bring me to a list of purchase orders. If I click on the plus next to purchase orders, it's going to bring me to the window to enter in a new purchase order. So you can see that here. This is a purchase order, one purchase order that's shared across my entities. If I click on the private ones, I'll see the ones that have been created just within a specific entity. Okay, from this window, I can use the workflow to convert it to a vendor invoice. I can view this or edit this purchase order, this commitment. And again, have that ability to code the information appropriately. Now, Intec's also key on providing the information when it's most needed. So if I'm reviewing this transaction or approving this transaction, I have this button here that says Spend Insights. And what Spend Insights does is it's going to look at how this transaction is coded, which job, which cost code, which cost type. And it's going to tell me what my budget was for this item, for that specific coding. Now it tells me here that I don't have any budget for this job in this cost code and cost type. And I haven't spent anything yet. It's just this committed $10,000 on this purchase order. If I had spent something, I could drill down here and I could see all of the transactions that make up that actual cost. Or by clicking on the commitments, I can see all the purchase orders or subcontract agreements that have been committed against this coding. So providing the information right at your hands to see. Now using that Spend Insights, the information's there. What the workflow is up to the individual company. So you could say, if I don't have any budget for it, prevent it from going any further. Make them pick something that has a budget. Or you can just warn them and let them continue. Okay.
I will point out, Eric, here that I know some of the folks that are on here today use Procore. So, and I'm not sure if everybody on here is integrating to their Sage 300 or not. Hopefully they are, but in the Sage Intec, same thing would apply over here. If you were using a Procore, then your subcontracts and your purchase orders would flow from your Procore and come right into Sage Intec and create these where Eric, the windows where Eric's at now. So you'd see them all over here in your Sage Intec.
That's a good point, Jeff. Thanks for pointing that out. Yes, those operational systems like Procore are used, the data flows right into Intec at that purchase order, that commitment level, and then you can interact with it and receive the invoices against it, or receive the invoices right in Procore as well. So a tight integration there. Intec has what we call open APIs, or what the industry calls open APIs. So there's a lot of systems that can be used that can plug into Intec, so that Intec can be used as a gathering of information and then reporting on it accurately with all the information that came from other systems. Okay. I'm going to jump back here to an accounts payable area and just look at my list of vendors. I'll just point out here that in all of these lists of information, I can click on export, of course, and just dump it to Excel if I want to do that. So it's just going to create an Excel list of my vendors, and then I can interact with it as such. So a lot of our customers that have used Office Connect, or that are in 300 or 100, may have an Office Connector tool that does the same thing. But in Intec, it's all part of the application itself. So my list of vendors opened up on my other windows, but it's formatted the same way that the list would be. So we can see that list of information directly from the export. And that's the same whether it's an active list inside of the application or a report that we're looking at. We can click on export and export it out to Excel or comma delimited or something like that. Okay, we also have the ability to do imports throughout the system. So if I click on import here, I can browse to a comma delimited or Excel file and import that in directly as well. So lots of tools there for working inside of Office or Excel. Okay. Another thing I'd like to point out here is that I'm just going to click on this edit, like I'm editing a vendor. Throughout the system, Intec has this help and support available to you. So if I click on help and about this page, it's going to tell me really useful information about creating a vendor, all the fields in here and what the fields do, additional information that are related to creating vendors, like duplicating of vendors, or other vendor contact information. But Intec is continuously updating these. Since this is a cloud-based product, these help menus stay up to date, and there's no need to update the system to get an updated help menu or updated application. So it's always going to have the most relevant and useful information. All right. All right. So again, right from the system, then creating the vendor information. I'll just point out here, we have different tabs of information, whether this is having to do with a vendor or a project. But within Intec, what's nice is that we can add as many different tabs as we want, and we can add other fields that we want. So, and this doesn't take any special IT knowledge. We simply say we want to add a new field. If the system is going to ask what kind of field do you want to add? Is it a drop-down field or a telephone number field or a text field, etc. And then you specify which section do you want that field to show on, or which tab. Do you want it to be on the additional information tab under the vendor details? Then it would put it right down here. So again, really powerful tools to be able to configure and personalize the application for each individual company's needs. Then we can take it to the next step and then report on any of those fields. So a new field or an existing field, I can say, show me a P&L report by subcontractors. And that would be able to pull this field in. All right. I want to point out a few different differentiators for Intec here. I'm going to jump into my banking side of things here and go into my checking accounts. Oh, tell me it's not going to save the changes I made because I didn't click on save. And so in this window here, I'm looking at my checking accounts. And one of the nice things here is that if I click on edit this checking account, Intec can print the Microcoding. I know in Sage 300, there's other products that allow you to do that, to print the Microcoding on the check. But Intec does that within the application. We can also connect to the banking cloud. So in the banking cloud, we can connect to a specific bank and have those transactions from that bank clear the bank account as in the software as they clear the bank account in real life. So just simplifying that bank reconciliation significantly by auto marking that on a daily basis. All right. A couple other things that I wanted to point out here. As an example, if I click on my WIP reports here, we're tracking information for the WIP automatically in the system instead of having to export that data and manipulate it in Excel. this gives us the ability to really design the WIP report that we want. So all of the columns are flexible. And even with the ability of kind of real time moving things around. So if I wanted to move where my columns showed up, I can just drag those columns around and have it be configured the way I want. In addition, I could include additional columns or remove columns as needed. It's a real easy reporting engine to be able to pull information and manipulate that. But also the depth of what it's tracking here in terms of the contract amounts, change orders, cost to complete information, and then being able to calculate everything down to over and under billings and earnings in excess of billings. So all of those calculations can be done within inside the report instead of those exports. All right. We can also group reports. This is something I know some people are looking for. At the end of the month, they want to produce a report group. So for example, this month-end report list might contain some balance sheets information, maybe some project costing information. So we add each individual report simply by selecting the report from a drill down. And then when we generate the report, all of that information then is configured as one report itself. So it could be in PDF or it could be in the application, could be in Excel, but we can see our balance sheet information and our P&L information and cash flows. It's all created as one report. And we can add footer notes to it if we wanted to do that as well. So the reporting capabilities inside the application is pretty extensive and gives us the ability to pull that information readily. Here's that footer text. And in addition to just entering it on every report, I could say every time I run the report, I want to prompt it. I want it to prompt me for what information do I want to include on the footer. All right.
Hey, Eric, can you talk about how you can automate some of those processes and maybe touch on smart rules? And it's kind of like for the folks that might have My Assistant, I kind of call it like My Assistant on steroids. So it's something that we do inside of the software.
Yeah, certainly. So within reports or report groups, we can schedule those to happen on an automatic basis. Maybe we schedule it for the 5th of every month for the previous month or something like that. But we can also, we have in Intec what's called smart rules and smart events. And what those do is smart rules are rules that I can use in the system to track information. For example, on my vendor list here, maybe I want a rule that says if the same tax ID number is used twice to warn the user that this tax ID number has already been created. Maybe I don't want to just track the vendor name, which you could do the same thing on the vendor name, but instead of A1 Electric Company, maybe it's just called A1 Electric is the other one, so it wouldn't have seen a duplicate. However, if we have the same tax IDs, maybe we could flag the user as this is a duplicate vendor. So whether it's in a transaction or vendor record or any kind of record that we set up, we can create rules for the transaction. This can extend to coding rules. So if I'm hitting my cost of goods sold materials account, it has to have a project on it, for example. So that's kind of the smart rules, some of the things that it can do, but we can also have smart events, and smart events can take action when you do something. So you could say maybe every time I create a new job in the system, email the job manager to let them know that it's been created. Or anytime we're getting close, we go over budget, email the budget coordinator to let them know that this account is over budget. So it could be emails or it could be posting transactions. Every time we create a new or close a job, we want to decrease our active job counts by 1. So that smart events can take action on a setting based on rules or based on some criteria that you've set up. One example of that we use quite often is that for time entry. So one of the things, if we're using Intec to record time entry or bringing time entries across into Intec, we can book project costs on the time entry or unbilled revenue on the time entry itself. So we can see real-time information as real as the data, the time entries that have been entered. So if people have entered their time today, I can see what that unbilled revenue is based off of the timesheet or maybe the project cost, how close I am to hitting the budget. So it's some useful ways that we have done that as well. Something else I like to point out is our retainage functionality here. So just come into this retainage. In the transactions in Intec, we can, of course, we can capture retainage both on the AP or AR side, but not only does it enter in retainage on the transaction, but it keeps track of that retainage ledger, as I call it. So how much has been retained, which invoices were retained, and then how much of that has been released. So I could say, for this transaction here, maybe I'm ready to release this $100. Or if I have 5 or 6 transactions that make up retainage, I could set up a retainage release percent. So I want to release 30% of all my retainage to the vendor. And then this is going to create a transaction. Since this is an AP transaction, it's going to create an AP bill of retainage for us to then pay off. In the same way on the AR side. So that retainage can stay reconciled really without you having to manually track that. All right. In the same way, budgets can be maintained and tracked and kept track of without you having to worry about if you're going over budget. All right. Sales tax can be calculated right automatically in the system. Again, one of the functionality you can do with Intec is use a configurable sales tax yourself or subscribe to a service like Avalara's Avatax. So the tax can be calculated based on the latitude and longitude of the address of the job or of the address of the invoice to calculate what things should be taxed and how much should they be taxed. So it doesn't require you to keep up to date on the new sales tax scenarios for every location you do business. All right. I'm going to jump around to another area of the application here in inventory. So in the inventory side of things, we can keep track of course, the costs and the quantities of an item inside the application. I'll just click on edit an individual item. So we can keep track of all the details. We can keep track of where in each warehouse, how much we have on hand, or whatever the case may be if we have inventory controls. Automatic purchasing of items that when they hit a certain threshold, order point quantities in the application. If we have serial items, maybe certain equipment that we have as serial or lot numbers, again, we can track that and then who purchased that lot number if we wanted to go down to that level of detail. So full inventory capabilities there within the application. All right. Estimates inside of a job. So I'll just jump over to my job costing area. And I'm going to jump into a specific company. So this is my general construction company, I can see these jobs. And again, here within jobs, we can have a hierarchy of jobs. So this is 2 levels. We have a parent and a child job, but we can go as deep as we want. If we want 5 levels of hierarchy, we can set that up as well. And so whatever level of hierarchy you want, and then each level, we can decide if we want to bill at that level or if we want to roll the billing to the level above it. We also have the ability to set up standard cost codes and multiple different standard cost codes. So I'll just grab a list here of my standard cost code catalog. And again, we can have a different levels of hierarchy. You can see here, I have 3 levels of hierarchy in this, but we can set up different types of cost codes or different groups of cost codes. So here, D is my developer cost codes, and I have all my residential cost codes starting with R, so I can filter out that list based on that. So we have the different groups of cost codes, and then we can decide on each individual job, which cost codes do we want to assign to that job and how do we want to track that. Okay, and we can track those jobs and the cost codes all by individual estimates. So if I click on my job estimates, I can load estimates in the system, and I can load multiple estimates for the same job. So for example, this job here is 20-005. Let's just filter that. So I'm looking at the estimates for 20-005. I have a cost to complete. So historical cost to complete, my February forecast, March and April forecast, and then my current estimate. So I might have, or I could add in what was my original estimate. So as I'm updating those estimates and forecasts, I can track trends across the system. So I can see how did my cost to complete or cost at completion forecast, how did that transfer or change over time if I wanted to look at what's happening on those cost to completes in detail. All right, I'm going to pause there. Jeff, do we have any other specific questions that have come through on the system or on the chat?
There was a question that came in a little while ago. I was waiting for a little break, more probably about due to, do froms and multi-companies, that maybe you could expand on that a little bit, Eric.
That's a great point. So as I mentioned, all of the entities live in this top level. And when we set up, we can have as many different entities as we need set up in here. And when we post a transaction, we can code an individual transaction across as many different entities. Now, all the due to, due from accounts get hit in the background. We don't have to know that. We just have to know where to code the expenses to, or the revenue to, or whatever the case may be. And the due to, due froms happen automatically. So it keeps those intercompany transactions in line. And then you can eliminate any of those intercompanies when we consolidate and roll up those transactions. So there are several ways that you can handle that in Intec. And one of the ways is you can produce invoices for your other companies. So one entity that owes another entity money can then receive an AP invoice automatically, and then have something to pay against to balance out those due to, due from accounts. So real strongly flexible there. We can share information across the system, or we can keep it private. So if we have multiple entities working on the same job, we can set that job up one time, and then multiple entities can work on it. And we even can set up an automatic intercompany billing based on if company A owns the job and is going to bill the customer for the job, a company B supplies some of the labor for that, then company A is going to owe company B some money to pay back that labor. So we can let all of that happen in the background using those do to, do from accounts for transactions that flow through the system. So I'll just grab another dashboard here. As I mentioned, we have several different dashboards. Looks like I don't have my do to, I didn't create a do to, do from dashboard here, but we can set up dashboards that then show the entities, how the entities owe each other, and how that will be rectified by AP and AR intercompany billing. Okay. Oops. So I do again have an approvals dashboard. We have approvals throughout the system, and we can see what information would be valuable when we're approving cost transactions or journal entries or whatever the case may be. Here's maybe cash, AP, AR, and then the aging of where those lie in order to see what needs to be approved. I also have the ability to chat throughout the system. So I can flag one of my users here and ask them a question. Has July invoicing been done? Okay. And then this tool allows us to really collaborate inside the application so everybody can see that information. So I've asked Dennis a question: has July invoicing been sent out? And he will get an email that says he's been tagged on a transaction, be able to click on that, and it will be brought in right into this conversation where he can respond.
And while we're talking about approvals here, Eric, I know we got a few users on here today that use Timberscan as well. So I think I mentioned at the beginning that we integrate. Timberscan can integrate. There's actually a cloud version called Titanium of the Timberscan that integrates. So if you're using a Timberscan and you are happy with that and going to continue to use that, you could migrate to the Titanium version of Timberscan, and that would integrate right into the Sage Intec as well. And we still have approvals over here that you might use for some things, but other things might come from Timberscan that are project related. So it could be a combination of those types of things. I got two quick questions, Eric, and I know it's time for us to wrap here in a few minutes. We could keep going for another couple hours easily, but both of them around security. One at kind of a high level talk about Intec from a security standpoint because we're up in the cloud, and then the other one is security down at a user level.
Great, yeah, great question. So Intec uses the banking protocol for security, dual authentication. So if I always log in on the same machine, then it's going to remember that machine. But if I log on to a different laptop, it's going to like text me or email me and give me another code to get into the system. So it uses that dual authentication purpose for logging in. And then the authentication or the security within the user base itself is pretty granular. You get to say what windows people can access, and can they access it in a read-only or an edit mode. And then you can even change secure the data a little bit further by saying certain users only have access to certain entities or certain departments. You can do it so that only like project managers can only view their own projects. So there's a lot of security set up that way, or security flexibility that way, that you can secure that data.
Great. Well, thank you, Eric. I took control back of your screen up over here for just to kind of wrap up. And thanks again for everybody for taking the time to attend today and for the questions that came in. And we'll make sure we send out a recording as well afterwards. And if you would like to do a follow-up presentation, we're happy to take a deeper dive for your team. I know it's hard to get a lot of information to go through in an hour, but we're just kind of scratching the surface. But yeah, we're happy to do individual presentations, more personalized for your group. And just some of the key takeaways, when we're moving to the cloud, you're able to not just, have the software up in the cloud, easier access for everybody. It's a great user interface that's, a look and feel that's throughout the software, very consistent. Something I know a lot of folks that we don't have today in our Sage 300. And there's just some things that we can do in Intec that we can't do in the 300 software because of the database on the back end. It's also some things to take into consideration, like savings on hardware, your servers and workstations and things in the company that it can help to eliminate. So when you're looking at moving to the cloud, there's things to consider, outside of the software. And there's lots of, if you have multi-entity, Eric showed a little bit of that today, but very strong capabilities with multi-entity, consolidated financials, and of course the intuitive dashboards that we don't have today. It's kind of like information assistant, but being able to actually drill down and get clear to the transaction level. So thank you again. And my email's on the screen. Please feel free to reach out to me. We'll send out a follow-up email after this as well. And everybody, hope you have a great rest of the day. And if we can be of help, let us know. Thank you. And thanks, Eric.
Yep, thank you.